first of all, I just want to thank WordPress Omaha for inviting me to come talk tonight. And I thank all of you for showing up to listen to me rant about one of my passions, which is web design. And so I guess I should tell you a little bit about myself before I dive into the topics that I'm going to cover. And I've decided to skip the boring stuff and skip straight to the story I always tell whenever someone asks me how I decided to make a career in web design. So way back in 2006, when a year after YouTube blew up and MySpace was the #1 social media platform on the internet, the internet was in an interesting growth and transition period. I was only 12 years old at the time. However, one of the most interesting things about the time in which I was growing up was watching how quickly the internet and even technology in general transitioned and evolved. My middle school years were filled with AIM online group chats, building MySpace layouts, designing flyers and invitations in Microsoft Publisher, just for fun, sprucing up my school papers with fantastical word art, and messing around in Photoshop. And I didn't realize this at the time, but this was the very beginning of my path towards a career in design. So here I am, 12 years old, sitting at my parents' 13-inch desktop PC, furiously typing out HTML markup, exhilarated by what I could create just by typing out combinations of keys on the keyboard. I was creating a MySpace layout for my best friend, aka redoing her MySpace profile. This is something I did on a regular basis. Little did I know, 10 years later I would be in my very first front-end development class at Metro, typing out HTML5 and CSS3. At this point in time, I always thought design on the web was ugly. I was a super art-interested student, and it was my best subject, and I grew up around artists. A lot of people in my family are artists. So I was always like, it's gross. But I loved the functionality of the internet and like how many possibilities it presented. It was like magic to me, which is where my interest in web kind of grew over time. But really, my aha moment, and I will never forget this now, but it happened one day back in 2006, 2007, when I was navigating the vast and glorious World Wide Web, clicking my way through websites and thinking to myself, man, how cool would it be if my job was to just make websites perfect? Funny thing is, I don't remember making this remark until 7 years later, after wasting 3 semesters at UNO, changing my major 4 times, that I realized I wanted to pursue this path in design. It was also at this time that I realized that my passion for design surrounded the web. So once I finally realized this was once I remember making that remark, and then it was just like, okay, this is exactly what I'm supposed to be doing. So back then, when I was like 12, 13, I was exploring the internet with a passion and interest that still drives me to this day. When I was in high school, I took a digital media class, which was really just learning how to use Photoshop CS4. I had been dabbling in Photoshop since I was 10 or 11 when my dad brought home the CS2 version. He also brought me a book to help me learn it, and I was totally gung-ho with it. I spent hours and hours and hours playing with Photoshop, and I just loved it. So when I saw that my high school was offering a digital media class, I jumped right on it because I was like, wow, this has always been something I'm really interested in. And I didn't even realize that it was kind of shaping my path towards eventually deciding to create a career in web design, but I was just doing it for fun because it was something that I really, really enjoyed and it excited me. So the point I'm trying to make is that it's safe to say that my life and my career path have been continually shaped by technologically based creative aids and programs, which has absolutely led me to where I am today. So, part of the requirements of the web design program I went through was learning HTML, CSS, WordPress, and some JavaScript. As someone who hadn't written HTML markup in over 10 years, I found like trying to relearn how to code severely frustrating. I could not get my mind to think in the steps and the ways that coding needed me to. And I was just like so frustrated because I was like, I used to be able to do this like when I was such a little kid, like why can't I do this anymore? But it took me hours and hours and hours of frustrating trial and error until one day it just finally clicked. And I was like, this is awesome. And so it was like an adrenaline rush, and I only wanted to learn more. Being able to write a bunch of code and mark up a web page and make my web page look exactly like my Photoshop mockup was incredibly electrifying for me. And although I'm technically a designer, I love being able to make my designs come to life on the web, which is also where my love of WordPress comes into play. Just like front-end dev, WordPress was an interesting but super fun challenge for me to master. As a designer, I liked how visual developing a WordPress site was, especially with an awesome premium theme like Divi. But when I was first learning WordPress, working with free themes posed interesting challenges from what I was able to accomplish from a design perspective. But knowing a little bit of CSS made that easier. Messing around with widgets and discovering super awesome plugins was also an aspect of WordPress I came to greatly appreciate, because they not only create more functionality, but they provide more robust opportunities for customization. Regardless, throughout my WordPress experience, I've been able to pull off designs using both paid and free themes, and I think that's an extremely important skill to master if you work as a WordPress designer. There will be times when you will be able to use highly functional and customizable WordPress themes to make your designs come to life, but there will also be times when you will be limited to using a free theme, which might be the case if it's a personal website or if you get a job with a super low budget. But I'm here to tell you that you shouldn't feel like a free theme needs to limit your site's abilities and functionalities, because it's absolutely not the case. So I'm going to introduce two of the best free themes out there. This one is called Shapely, and this one is called Ildy. And they're both fully responsive, highly customizable, SEO plugin friendly, and much more.
What was the first one called?
Shapely. Did you get it? Okay. So when using a free theme, after I've designed page mockups and before beginning any development on my WordPress site, I download the Site Origin Page Builder and Site Origin Widgets bundle. For any of you who have used a module-based premium theme like Divi, these Site Origin resources work exactly like that, but even better, they're free and they work great with free themes. They even have pre-built layouts, which can help speed up your development process immensely. And if you wish to add more functionality, you can buy the premium version for a reasonable price. They offer monthly and yearly subscription options. The Page Builder plugin even has built-in animations and multiple different libraries of icons to choose from, and it works pretty much just like a premium theme that is based on module-like designing. So, planning for and designing a WordPress site is different than planning for and designing a non-WordPress site. When you're designing a non-WordPress site, you don't really need to worry about what your theme is going to let you accomplish or what kind of bumps in the road you might discover that are unrelated to coding, because you're designing from the ground up, starting completely from scratch in a text editor. However, when you're designing a WordPress site, you kind of have to think in terms of themes, because they lay the foundation for your site. Once you're in the development phase, you're not starting in a blank page editor, you're starting with a pre-designed backbone of a website that now needs content, functionality, navigation, and page layout and structure added to it. It is for this exact reason that before you even begin wireframing and designing page mockups, you should decide on a theme, because the theme will play an important role in your design decisions, acting as almost an initial wireframe itself. All well-designed free and paid themes will have plenty of demos and documentation for you to click through and read, which is something you should definitely look for when you're choosing a theme. However, it's also important to know a few things about the site and its necessary functionality before you even begin searching for the proper theme. So, questions to ask yourself or your client. Who is the website for? So this fishes at the audience that your site is speaking to when it comes to who you're trying to reach. In order to do this, you have to define who your users are and establish what their goals are when they come to your website. you have to think of scenarios that demonstrate the different situations your users are going to find themselves in when they come to your website, and what kind of content and functionality they expect to find once they finally get there. This next question has to do with functionality. So what does this website absolutely need to do? What basic functions does the site need to possess? And this question also goes hand in hand with the type of website you're designing. Is it an e-commerce site, a content-driven site, and so on. I'll get into that type of stuff later, but that's all going to coincide with functionality. The next question is, what problems does it need to solve, or what's the goal of the design of the website? So these are questions you'll ask your client, and they might not know the answer, but you can prompt them and be like, do you need to up conversion rates? An example of this would be, we need people to buy more of this product, or we want more people to sign up for our newsletter, blah, 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 blah. Another question is, are current users experiencing issues with the site's interactive or technological functions? Yes.
What's conversion?
A conversion rate, it's the percentage of users who take a certain desired action. Another goal of the design might be to accurately portray and visually communicate a company's unique identity and be able to explain what they do and what they provide to their users. Next question, what is the point of its existence? This means, why does this website need to exist, and what is it primarily used for? What is the purpose of this site? And the last question is, what is its point of difference? This is what sets it apart from other sites that fall into the same category. How can you make it stand out amongst others that are similar in nature? So once you've finally determined the purpose of the site you're building and what kind of functionality it needs and the type of content that will be provided, you can go ahead and search for the right theme. With these things in mind, you can choose a theme that is compatible with your site's needs, making the design and development processes quick and easy to execute. So when you begin designing a WordPress site, make sure you're familiar with the theme's demo and have looked through its documentation. These things are going to provide you with a good idea as to what a basic page layout looks like, how you can place and customize certain elements, how interactive elements like sliders look and function, and how the site changes when it goes from desktop to tablet to mobile, and so on. But before I go into the more deeper design decisions, I want to briefly cover some basic design principles that will act as almost a checklist when you're designing a website. Oops, skip that. Sorry guys. So web design best practices. This can mean a lot of things, both visual and technical, but like I said, I'm just going to go over the basics. This is something I like to cover with the students that I mentor in Interfaces Foundations of Web Development class. They're super basic, but they're applicable to any type of design. But I'll explain how they apply to web design. So in any design-based class, you learn about principles of good design. And a lot of web design from a beginner standpoint begins with learning, exploring, and then using these principles. So when it comes to web design, these basic but extremely important design principles include contrast, emphasis, hierarchy, proximity, repetition, and cohesion. All of these go hand in hand with how you decide to handle the layout, functionality, imagery, typography, and everything else on your site. Contrast. Simply put, contrast is the difference between two or more elements. In web design, we can use contrast to create visual interest and to direct our users' attention. Without contrast, web pages would be nearly impossible for users to digest and comprehend. And contrast can help us organize page content and visual elements. It can also help us create a digestible and pleasing flow for the user, and it can establish a good sense of visual hierarchy for the user to follow without necessarily having to think about it. When most people hear the word contrast, they think of color. While color isn't the only way to achieve contrast, it can go a long way in helping the user intuitively differentiate distinctive page elements or sections from one another. More so, almost everyone knows that practically All websites have a header, a main content area, and a footer. These are all completely different areas on a website that should have a clear visual separation, and using contrast and background color is a good way to achieve this. Changing the appearance of text on your web page can also help you achieve contrast. Using different colors, sizes, and even styles, you can successfully separate headings, subheadings, and paragraphs, which also helps to create visual hierarchy for your users. Contrasting fonts can help separate information, and color can help something stand out, and even size of elements can help create hierarchy and emphasis. By incorporating differences in size, shape, style, color, etc., you can take advantage of the principle of contrast and successfully accentuate the necessary differences between elements in a web design. So emphasis is what helps create a focal point in design. It's how we can bring attention to what's most important. Successful implementation of emphasis catches your user's eye and makes them stop and look, or stop and read, or stop and click. Without emphasis, visual communication between the website and the user can't occur. So emphasis can be created through contrast, and as I just mentioned, basically anything can be contrasted. So thinking about what's important and then using contrast to show that visually is creating emphasis. An element in contrast with something else is more easily seen and understood because something different always attracts the eye. So think of it as an anomaly that's going to stand out and grab our attention. For example, a person wearing a swimsuit outside in the dead of winter. That's not what you expect, but it catches your eye immediately. Emphasis can also be created by placement. Isolating an element from other elements through its position on a web page will place emphasis on it. Obviously, elements that are found towards the top of web pages or page sections are emphasized by placement, which intuitively lets the user know that those are the most important items. So hierarchy is accomplished through the use of contrast and emphasis. Think of hierarchy as order of importance, which means the order in which you want your user to see things on your web page. You can even think of hierarchy as different levels of emphasis, so from most emphasized to least emphasized. And then a good example of hierarchy and emphasis are the H1 through H6 elements in HTML markup. Your browser automatically renders the H1 through H tags as level of importance by using super basic principles of contrast and emphasis, which creates this very basic level of hierarchy. An important thing to remember, if everything in a design is emphasized, aka there is no contrast being utilized, nothing is going to stand out. And if nothing stands out, nothing is going to grab your user's attention, which also means there's no visual hierarchy, something we absolutely want to avoid. Proximity in web design means that similar or related objects and information are grouped together, and then unrelated items are separate. It's very basic common sense, but the use of proximity in web design kind of helps us to create less clutter and come up with an organized layout that makes sense to people. So when you place unrelated items further apart, you emphasize their lack of relationship to each other. As we've covered, the physical and visual relationships between design elements create a level of emphasis which helps us establish hierarchy. Every object or element in a design has a kind of gravitational pull of relation to other objects that are closest to it, which is then based on their position to one another. So to website users, close proximity indicates that things are connected or have an important relationship to each other, and it makes them one visual unit, which ultimately provides a logical organization and structure of a web page layout or section. So if you think about it, if using contrast and emphasis in a number of ways is essential to giving your website a clear sense of visual hierarchy, it makes sense to assume that a website's architecture and flow of information are the foundation of effective proximity. This means it's extremely important to use the principle of proximity as a guiding factor in a website's construction, particularly while you're still laying out your sitemap and during the wireframing stage of your designing your website. As humans and observant individuals, it's obvious to us that content that is organized into a hierarchy and grouped together logically is incredibly easier to read and comprehend than content that's not. This is the whole idea behind proximity. Proper visual hierarchy through the use of proximity helps users to explore deeper into your website without worrying about where they are, where they've been, or where they're going. This means that they're comfortable using your website and they'll be able to get to the most important information quickly and efficiently. Repetition is reusing the same or similar elements throughout your entire design. So the repetition of certain elements creates a sense of unity and consistency, which can happen within a single page layout or within multiple pages throughout the whole website. Effective repetition occurs when the same or similar elements are used more than once in a design. This can mean shapes, colors, lines, graphics, hover activity, etc. So being able to repeat certain elements in a consistent manner helps promote the organization of a website and reinforces its overall sense of cohesion. Repetition goes hand in hand with cohesion because it's one of the means by which you're able to reach this cohesive design. Simply put, cohesion is the act of forming a united whole. So when a web design is cohesive, it means that we have successfully used contrast, emphasis, hierarchy, proximity, and repetition to create a website that is visually and logically separated, makes sense, is pleasing to the eye, but is ultimately unified through its overall design. We can achieve unity through the practice of sticking to this same design for elements that share a common trait or purpose, even if they exist in certain sections of the design. For example, buttons, links, headings, subheadings, paragraphs, and so on should probably all look the same or similar regardless of where they're at on your web page. If you style one button one way and another button a different way, you're throwing your user off and confusing them, if only for a split second. Once a user interacts with a certain element, they expect the same element to look and act the same throughout the entire design. This is especially the case for buttons and links since they possess a specific purpose and functionality. So, how do we use design principles to create dynamic page layouts that users want to read and explore? When it comes to choosing the correct layout or layouts for your site's pages, you need to focus on the type of websites that you're designing. If it's a content-heavy website, you don't want to overwhelm your users with too much text and cluttered elements and not enough emphasis or hierarchy. It really needs to be very easily digestible and understand what this website is providing for you from a content basis. So breaking your pages down into simple, digestible chunks helps enhance scannability and readability, and it ensures a user's initial comfort with the site. Using a good balance of imagery and text can help ease your user into the information that you want them to consume. Our eyes lock to images almost instantaneously, so if you have a text or a button that's super important, place an image or an icon right above it so it moves your user's eye down. So, Newsweek is a content-heavy website, and the design is almost flawless. I think it's very, very, very good representation of a well-designed, content-heavy website. So, this is the homepage. It's the first thing you see when you navigate to the website. In this first section, it's divided into two columns, but it has a very large image, and on the right is a list of links with a call to action at the bottom. The image on the left directs the eye to that sidebar. And then if you scroll down, we can see that there's 4 evenly distributed columns that separate out different news articles. So through the use of contrast, hierarchy, and emphasis, and even proximity, they successfully break down a lot of content that's easy to read and digest. The next section is similar to the previous one, but it falls under a separate category. So notice how they used repetition and proximity in their column layout to enhance their overall design. The as you can see, we reuse red for like the topic that these articles fall under and black for the article's title and stuff like that. So they're already expecting that, and even though it falls under a different section, they kind of know what to expect. And then this next section, they kind of flipped the first layouts to where the image is on the right, but they use this highly contrasted word on top of the white words on black background to kind of guide our eye. It works either way. But the image directs you back to the blue in the headline and the blue button. And really what it's trying to get you to do is they're calling the user to click through all these different images, but the way that they laid it out kind of makes you actually want to click through it. So for a site that's packed full of content, the design decisions that they've made allow the site to feel comfortable and easy to digest and navigate through, which is absolutely something that you want in a content-heavy website. I've been to multiple content-heavy websites, and as soon as I get there, I'm overwhelmed, and I'm like, I don't even want to look through this. So obviously, you want people to click through your website and read your content. So if it's an e-commerce site, you probably want a site that's image heavy, informational, but also compelling and easy to navigate and search through. You should focus on call to actions, images, and animations that create visual hierarchy and interactive interest. So if we look at Sierra Design's homepage, we immediately see this big, bright image and this uniquely designed Think Outside headline. Automatically, I'm interested because it's different. It's big, it's emphasized, there's hierarchy. So they're creating interest through emphasis and hierarchy. And then if you scroll down to the next section, we notice some call to actions that are meant to push the user through the site. And notice the repetition in the yellow underline. That was in the previous section as well. And it becomes a repetitive design element that's used throughout the entire website. The fact that they placed these three images directly under those call to actions was actually really smart because our eyes automatically go to those images, but because of the contrast and the hierarchy and the emphasis of the call to actions above them, our eyes move up to them because we go to the images and then we see all that nice contrast and stuff. This last section is, that's not the last. This next section is a promotional section. So it's pretty simple, but they use contrast and imagery to, sorry, I don't know what I'm doing. Through contrast and color, okay. Anyways, this next section features a lot of imagery, but with the right amount of hierarchy to be informational, but also visually interesting. The yellow box at the top and this yellow line at the bottom helps separate the section, but also create a sense of repetition that drags the eye from the top down. So if you're designing an informational or promotional website about a company or a business, it's important to focus on what's most important for users to see and know. Text on top of an image or image slider is a great way to focus your user's eye to text and image at the same time. These could also act as call to actions to move your user throughout the site. So if we take a look at this Ashford and Ashford website, immediately we see that there's a good use of contrast and emphasis with imagery to bring the focal point to the text on top of the image. These red diamonds act as an invisible box for the text to live in and immediately draw your eye down in there, especially because the text is so contrasted with its background. When you scroll down to the next section, we see that they've used a different background color as a way to indicate a new section in the site, and it features this 3-column structure that uses imagery and contrast to create a sense of hierarchy. So because this white text is the most contrasted in this section, we immediately see that first. So we jump from here to here, but we know that this white text is going to relate to the text at the top. And the way that they handled the icons in the body copy, having them in the same color, it acts the same way your eye jumps down because we notice patterns, so it's automatically pairing these colors together. So between the white, jumping between the white and the gray, it creates a balanced layout. So this next section utilizes the same tactic of changing the background color, but it uses the red button as emphasis and a way for the user to easily notice it and interact with it. This section is basically telling the user, this is who we are, and this is why you should choose us in our service, so contact us now. This section is a way of moving your user to action based on feeling through the use of imagery, contrast, and emphasis. This next section just features testimonials, but it uses a different colored background with the simple but effective use of hierarchy and repetition. And this last section works in the same way as the others while also separating itself. The reuse of the red button and the red diamonds pulls the overall design together, but the background color and section header tell the user about the separate purpose of this section and gives them the opportunity to utilize it. All three of these websites utilize all the different design principles in different ways based on their content, functionality, and purpose. Because their page layouts and design choices complement these things, these websites are cohesive designs that are effective for their type of industry and audience. So, some tips and tricks for making initial design decisions. Tip number 1, layout first, design second. So the wireframing stage comes after you've determined the site's purpose, necessary functionality, and the type of content it's going to contain. So you have a good idea about what the layout is going to need to look like because you know its purpose and functionality. So use this wireframing stage in the design process to lay out the structure and the sections in your site in a way that makes sense, promotes visual hierarchy, adheres to the site's content functionality, and provides variety while also maintaining consistency. Think of our human makeup. The skeleton is the structure of what's visible on the outside. So without this structure, there's nowhere for the skin to live or exist successfully. So similar to this, designing websites is a layering process that creates structure, adds visual representation to create interest and familiarity, ultimately creating a unified whole. Obviously, we want to ask our client the right design-related questions. It's important to ask them what defines their brand or company, how they want to be perceived by their users or customers, and how they want their website to feel when people visit and interact with it. I always ask for keywords or descriptors they feel describe their brand identity. Almost every time I ask it, they have to pause and think because it's never a question they're expecting. And sometimes you'll need to prompt them, but ultimately they discover the right things to say. And after you kind of have an idea of what describes their brand, it's also important to know how they want to be perceived by their key users and who they are wanting to speak to when you're designing this website or when they're interacting with this website. So do they want to appear credible, traditional, corporate, friendly, things like that. When you ask them about the mood and feel of a website, they'll probably mention some of the same words that they already told you, but try to prompt them towards moods or feelings that might be relevant to their industry or maybe the place that they operate business in. For example, if it's a website for a theater, they probably want the website to feel maybe kind of dark and dramatic, but also deep and artistic. And then if it's a website for a kid's summer camp, they probably want the website to feel exciting, energetic, bright, and welcoming. So the idea behind this is the feel of a website should also reflect the feel of a company's public identity, as it literally is a visual representation of who they are and what they do or offer their users. So these types of questions will lead you to choosing the correct color palette, fonts, and style of imagery for your design. Which is kind of where this idea of a mood board comes in. I always say gather inspiration from everywhere, but make sure it follows along those feelings and descriptors of what you've been able to gather by talking to your client. So once you have a good visual idea and feel about what the website will emulate, you can create a style tile that has your color choices, typefaces, and text hierarchy laid out for you already. So when you're kind of making these design choices, you have to ask, are these fonts that I'm considering, do they have the right mood and feel of what this look and feel of the website is supposed to be? Or are they easy to read? Do they feel cohesive with the brand's identity? It's the same with colors too. Are they cohesive with the brand's identity? But also think about how we can use colors to create contrast and emphasis, and colors that portray that right mood and feel. You also need to think about how you can create visual hierarchy through typography, use of color, and the placement of your page elements. You kind of always have to be asking yourself which elements and information are most important to your key users. So obviously we want to utilize this move forward and style tile that we took time to create. And it can really act as a very helpful aid in your design process. I always consistently refer back to mine when I'm designing my page mockups. It helps maintain consistency and it increases workflow. Style tiles are important because they're organized. They keep all your basic design and styling choices in one place. You can focus on implementing them into your site's layout and structure, kind of making it easier to insert content and page elements. Obviously, after designing comes site development. So once you've finally mocked up your main pages, implementing your design in WordPress is quick and easy, especially when you use a module-based page builder like the Site Origin plugin I talked about. All you have to do is set up the layout that you've already come up with, insert the content that you already have, make the necessary styling changes so they match your design and style tile, add some interactivity, and voila, your page is designed and complete. Here's an example of what a web page might look like if you built it in the page builder plugin. So at the top of the page is an image slider, and then the next section features an icon, descriptive text, and a button, and a 4-column layout, and then beneath that is an image grid, which is kind of an idea of the type of functionality that you can create with this page builder plugin. Launching your site. So once your site is completely developed and you've checked to make sure all your hyperlinks work, your images load, and your contact forms work, etc., it's probably time to launch your site. But before that, we need to take SEO into account. Search engine optimization. It's very important. If your users can't find your site, what was the point of even building it? SEO is such a crucial aspect of garnering website traffic, and there's actually a couple really great plugins that can help you do this really easily. In my opinion, Yoast SEO is the best. The free version it works very well. You don't even need to upgrade unless you have like a really big content-heavy site that needs a lot of search engine optimization and customization. But this free version, it's pretty awesome. It allows you to see a rendering of what your page or post will look like when it shows up in search results. It'll tell you whether your page title is too short or too long. And it can even tell whether your meta description makes sense in the context of a search result. It also has this awesome page analysis functionality that checks simple things that you might have forgotten to check. So it checks to make sure your images have alt text, and it checks to make sure that your pages contain the focus keyword that you set for that page, because that's kind of how that whole SEO plugin works, is you set a focus keyword for each page. It also checks whether you've written a metadata description, and if that metadata description contains your chosen keyword. It even automatically optimizes and inserts meta tags and links and link elements that search engines like Google really like. So it increases your chances of showing up higher on the search results. So kind of, you can see the benefits of using an SEO plugin, and it is super important when you're launching a site because all website owners want their site to be relevant, easy to find, and accessible, and proper SEO functionality really makes that happen. Okay, things to take away. Remember that a website is a way to visually and uniquely interact with your users. You have to be designing for the right audience. Think of a business that establishes a rapport with a repeat customer. In this situation, the customer feels welcome, they feel important, and they feel comfortable. When we're designing a website, we want to visually establish a rapport with our users with the same end goal. When they travel to our website, we want them to feel welcome, important, and comfortable. If you make the correct design decisions, you'll be able to successfully establish this kind of visual rapport that either keeps your users coming back or causes them to travel throughout your website and interact with it. So, it's one thing to design a really beautiful and unique website that holds a really certain aesthetic, but if your site isn't clear, functional, navigable, readable, or usable, it doesn't hold its true purpose and you'll lose your key users. We can make a design look good by making design decisions based around these important, more technical aspects, because when we streamline page layout and design elements to fit the site's purpose, we're already creating a unique and pleasing experience for our key users. And this is really one of the things I love about web design. It pairs functional and sensible technicalities with visual aesthetic. And when you do it right, your users enjoy the experience because it's easy to use and fulfills its purpose, and it accomplishes their goals that they come there to accomplish. So if you can do this, they'll automatically appreciate the look and feel of the design. And that is all I have for you guys. Thanks for listening.